In this section, we're going to be talking about your photography studio. This is one of the most exciting aspects of photography, and that is owning a studio. I cannot know many photographers that want to have a studio. But the real question is, are they ready? Is it a good idea? And in these next few lessons, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of having a studio and everything that you need to think about if you're going to get a studio or you currently have a studio. So the first thing I want to talk about is, when are you ready to have a photography studio? If your studio costs money and you're actually renting out a space for your photography studio, then the photography studio should be one of the last things you do. You should be succeeding and striving as a photographer before you get a studio. That's my personal opinion on it, and let me tell you why. When it comes to your studio, you're adding a lot of cost and maintenance into your photography business that gets away into the whole actual photography business side and making money and charging and marketing and all of that. And while it seems like you will make more money and be able to market better if you have a studio, because of the cost and the time and the energy and the stress and the things you have to think about to run a studio, it's actually going to get in the way. Because even though, let's say you make a little bit more money, minus your costs, you're actually making less money a lot of the times. I ended up opening up a studio a few years back, and I was doing really good in my photography career, but I wasn't striving. I wasn't succeeding a lot. And the reason I did it was because the winter time was coming, an opportunity came, and I took it, and I learned from it. I learned that I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't striving as a photographer. I wasn't making a lot of money that I could spare some in a studio space. And with the cost of the studio, I drowned and closed down the studio. And hopefully you guys can learn from my mistake not to do that. Do not open up a space that's going to cost you money, that it comes to a point where you have to close it down, even if you keep making what you're making now. So for example, let's say, base numbers examples of what I mean. Let's say you make $2,000 a month from photography, okay? The studio space costs $500. If your expenses to get by is more than $1,500, and your hope is that the difference will be made from your studio, then it's not a good idea to open up a studio. But let's say you're making $4,000 a month in your photography, and it only takes you $1,000 to live, and you can spare an extra $1,000 to open up a studio. And even if you make what you're making now and never use a studio, you can still pay for the studio. Then it's a good idea to open up a studio to really grow and expand your photography. So that's what I mean by make sure that you're striving and you have money to spare for your studio. Don't do it when you're barely getting by and you're hoping that the studio will pay for itself, and it really won't. In the very beginning, it could take you months, maybe even a year, before the studio is making more money than what it cost, and then you could afford the studio. So that's the things that you really have to think about before you open up a studio. Are you striving? Can you afford the studio even if you don't make more money because you have a studio? And if those questions are yes, then maybe it's time to open up a studio if you feel your business could use it, because of the type of the photography that you do, and having a studio could help take more pictures. So that's it when it comes to when are you ready to open up your studio. Now we're going to move on to the next lesson.